faced the small congregation and spotted the Armitage couple. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. Every head in the congregation swiveled around to look at the elderly pair. The three men in front of them seemed particularly menacing. Sylvia couldn't help but notice the fine scar that ran from eye to chin on the face of the middle one. Edward stuttered an apology. "So sorry. We seem to have come to the wrong service." He took Sylvia's hand and quietly led her out of the chapel, back into the bright sunshine outside. "I'm feeling quite queasy, Ted. Who were those people?" Sylvia's voice was quivering. Her husband shook his head. "Don't know. Look, that's more like our lot." He pointed towards a group of elderly people making their way along the drive towards them, several of them using walking sticks. A hearse appeared in the distance, turning in from the road outside. "Thank goodness," Sylvia said, feeling calmer. "Normal people at last." They didn't see the man who'd slipped out of the crematorium building behind them. He was obscured by shrubs, but had found a gap through which his telephoto lens pointed at the Armitage couple. Chapter 1. Missing. Monday, Week 1. Sharon Giraud was starting to feel worried. She was standing in the front porch of her parents' bungalow in Blandford, having rung the doorbell 3 times, and still there was no response. The bell was most certainly working. The sounds of the electronic chimes had carried clearly through the door, but no movement could be seen through the thick, patterned glass. She pressed her nose to the door and tried the bell one last time. Nothing. Sighing, she opened the zip on her shoulder bag and felt down through its assorted contents to the smaller inner compartment, extracting the keys kept inside. Nothing serious could have happened to her parents, surely. Admittedly, she hadn't seen them for 2 weeks, having returned from holiday with her own family only the previous day. They hadn't answered her phone call, made immediately after she and Pierre had put their 2 young children to bed, and that was strange. Her parents rarely went out on a Sunday evening, not with one of their favourite historical dramas being broadcast mid-evening. There had been no time to check on them earlier in the day, not with her own return to work and its incessant pressures. A GP's working life is one continuous logjam of problems that require immediate action, especially after a fortnight's absence. Sharon turned the key in the lock and opened the door. "Mum? Dad?" she called. There was no answer, no sound of movement. The air seemed slightly stale, as if no window had been opened for days. Impossible, surely. She'd phoned her younger brother the previous evening after their parents' lack of response, and he'd said that the elderly couple had been fine earlier that weekend. But then, he would say that, wouldn't he? Sharon realised with some certainty that her brother had been lying. He hadn't called in to see them. He probably hadn't even bothered to phone. Absolutely bloody typical of the lazy, irresponsible tow-rag. Well, they certainly weren't anywhere inside the small dwelling. It had taken Sharon only a few moments to glance in all of the rooms. They were all neat and tidy as expected. She peered out of the kitchen window with its view over the garden, her father's pride and joy. Birds scattered as a neighbour's cat sashayed down the path from the shrubs at the far end. No sign of her parents, though. She turned back to the hallway, and then her heart lurched. That pile of post gathered on the mat behind the door wasn't just from a day or 2. It looked more like a week's accumulation. Most of it was junk mail, as she would have expected, but there was a lot of it. She pulled her phone out of her bag and called her brother. Tucking her long hair behind her ears, she waited for him to answer. "Rod, you lying toad! You said you'd called in to see Mum and Dad at the weekend, but you didn't, did you?" There was a pause before he answered. "Well, I was kind of busy. Things were happening, you know." "I bet you didn't even phone them. When did you speak to them last? Tell me." "I'm not answerable to you. Why do you still think you can tell me what to do even now, you stuck-up cow? Bossing me about, bossing everyone about, as if you run everything." "Shut up, Rod. They're not here. It looks as though they...
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.